Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Stephanie Bree. I know this is going to be a kinda controversial video. I'm okay with that. And honestly, it's not going to be a very long video. Not because I don't have a lot to say about it, but because I'm not feeling well. And I feel like I am going to end up rambling if I talk about it too long. But we're talking about retro clone consoles. So a retro clone is a video game, a modern video game system that is designed to play video games from obsolete hardware from years past. These tend to come in at least two different formats. Format one is the FPGA, which is basically a board on a chip where they recreate the original hardware on presumably a 3D printed chip or something along those lines, and play the software that was compatible with that chipset relatively natively, more or less. They do sometimes have to pirate the BIOS and things like that, but that's tricky. The other one is straight emulation. You plug the cartridge into the machine and it just dumps the ROM from the cartridge and then it runs an emulator. So I have a couple of problems with retro consoles. I have a lot of problems with retro consoles. For one, just fucking emulate. God damn it. Seriously. We shouldn't be letting asshole capitalists get rich reselling video games to people. We need to put a stop to that right now. We just need to stop the used retro video game market entirely. There's no point to it. Just fucking emulate the games. That's better for preservation than these cartridges. The common reason people cite for they want a retro clone is because they do want to collect physical cartridges or CD-ROMs in some cases, depending on the system. But they don't want to own original hardware, either because it's too expensive, or in some cases it's fragile and breaks down too easy and it's hard to get, working hardware, or other reasons, whatever. Maybe they want one of those Retron 5s that plays multiple consoles and they can just save space or whatever. Now, more often than not, the console is just going to use emulation anyways. And it's just going to dump the ROM to the system. So at that point, you're better off just fucking emulating. Now, the common cited reason why people say they prefer the retro console to emulation is because while they're not against emulation on principle, they say things like you get a more authentic experience having a console because you get the physical controller, which I can debunk easily. One, those retro controllers are never authentic to the original hardware. And two, you can literally buy reproduction original controllers with USB ports. And if you want to use original, actual, authentic retro controllers, Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis, etc., you can actually get USB adapters that let you plug those original controllers into your computer. So your excuse that the retro console is more authentic is bullshit and rubbish, because it isn't. The emulation is more authentic. The second thing they'll say is, well, I want to be able to hook it up to a TV and recreate that experience. Again, I can debunk that because you can hook up a desktop or a laptop to a television just as easily, either through direct method HDMI, or you can get adapters. I once had I had a box that had VGA inputs, HDMI inputs, DVI inputs, and component and composite inputs. And on the other side of the box, it had that whole list of inputs as outputs. So I could hook up any retro computer to any retro or modern TV. These types of devices do exist. So again, you're not really getting a more, quote, authentic experience with a retro console as you would the real console or through emulation. Now, there are some who don't want to collect the physical cartridges, per se. They just want a physical representation that is tactile and memorable, closer to the original experience. So they'll buy a flash cart and plug that into their retro console and load it up with ROMs, which again, you're emulating ROMs on an emulator. Why would you pay extra money for a box that can do the same thing your laptop can already do? I don't know. Obviously, I'm on the side of emulation. This is very clear by my stance. However, that's not to say I am against owning original physical hardware. I'm not. Or collecting the physical cartridges. I'm not against that either. I'll talk about what I am against and why I have issues with it in a second. If you want to collect Super Nintendo cartridges and you want to play on a real Super Nintendo, go for it. More power to you. Just don't buy a Retron and then bitch about how game X or M or whatever isn't compatible with the machine, because they're not all compatible. There is no 100% compatibility. Now, sometimes you get people will say things like, well, I like the retro console because it has HDMI out. Okay. Again, if you want an authentic experience, why would you want HDMI out in the first place? Again, if you're playing a Super Nintendo and you want an authentic experience, you're hooking it up using composite video cables to a CRT television. You're not hooking it up to an HD TV. Because why would you? It's not an authentic experience. It's not an HD console. It can't output in HD. Even having HDMI on your Retron console isn't making those games HD. Oh, they can use filters and stretch the image and upscale and everything else, but your HD TV natively upscales the image on its own. There's no need to upscale. Doesn't really do it. It doesn't do it better than the TV already does. It's literally doing the same thing the TV's doing. It doesn't look any better. People say it does, but it doesn't. Which is the same reason why those upscaling DVD players back in the day didn't last long, because people figured out, you know what, I can just hook my regular DVD player up and the TV's going to upscale it just fine by itself. There was no benefit to having a, quote, upscaling DVD player. Same premise here. So really, I mean, there's really no, for me, justifiable reason to own a retro console. Again, going back to, well, I'm trying to save space. I just want one machine to, for all my games, and you're using the ROM cartridges, flash carts full of ROMs, because you just want to plug the thing into your TV and then just have NES, SNES, Genesis right there at your fingertips. You could still get the same thing from a laptop. Takes up less space than a retro console. HDMI out to the TV, USB controller in, and you can have more. You can have Atari. You can have Sega CD. You can have 32X and Sega Saturn and Nintendo GameCube and Game Boy and Game Gear and MAME and everything else. You don't have to limit yourself to those 3 systems. And again, you know, emulation is really the way to go. It just is. I mean, let's talk. I did say I was going to get into the issues I have with collecting, right? Issue number 1. A lot of video game collectors don't even play the video games at all. They just put them on a shelf and they just look at them. I have an issue with this because you are denying other people who would otherwise enjoy playing the game access to the game, which is a scummy thing to do. Also, doing this drives up the value of video games, which again makes them inaccessible to gamers, making them a collector's market, which is scummy in and of itself, because you have asshole resellers who will jack up the price every fucking chance they get just to squeeze as little bit of profit out of it as they can. And then you have the snobs, who I will call dipshits, like Pat Contry, who was an asshole. I'll call it to his face if I ever see him. Who say shit like, you have a responsibility to the collector market to make sure your cartridge is authentic and original and doesn't have a repo label and has never been cleaned, etc., etc., etc. Fuck you. Fuck you. If I'm going to go buy some crummy ass fucking, I don't know, Mega Man 3 cartridge for the NES and it's got a ripped label, I'm going to fucking print a repo label, put it on there, and I ain't going to tell a goddamn soul, and it's none of your motherfucking business. I do not have a responsibility to the so-called collector market. Eat shit. Eat shit. Because if you are so goddamn pedantic that you're willing to pay more money for an original but ripped label, fuck you. No, I mean it. Fuck you. You pedantic hipster piece of fucking filth. If I am pro physical media, don't get me wrong, I actually am. I don't have a problem with collecting physical cartridges for original consoles if it's games you're gonna play and enjoy, not putting on a shelf because you're not keeping it from other people who would enjoy it. And I'm more inclined if it's something you owned in your childhood and you have nostalgia for it, or you're a weirdo and you want to, nothing wrong with being a weirdo, that's not an insult, I'm a weirdo. You want to experience something from before your time. I did this. I bought Betamax VCRs and Betamax tapes and Laserdisc players and, old, obsolete, outdated media that was before my time, just for the fuck of it, because I have a fascination with film and film history. So, again, there's nothing wrong with that. No, go for it. I'm not going to buy a bootleg Laserdisc player to play bootleg Laserdiscs, because I don't see the point in that. And to me, that's what a retro console is. It's a bootleg console that can either play authentic or bootleg cartridges. And at that point, it's like, again, if you're willing to buy bootlegs, or if you're willing to pay money for ROMs, just emulate in the fucking first place. It's so much goddamn easier. I don't know, whatever.